I'm Jere Immonen, working in Finnish Institute of Occupational Health in a project called Fair Work on Platform. And this presentation is about my next article draft of my PhD, Psychological Contract in Platform Work, the nature of fair deal in diverse control structures. The main concept of this presentation are the term control and orientation. The psychological contract refers to sort of like fair deal, expectation of fair deal between workers and employers, but in this case I used as in a relationship between platform workers and platforms. So what is platform work? Often when I refer to platform work, and even I have had like 40 interviews with platform workers, they don't even consider themselves as platform workers. They don't know what the term actually includes or what it is. But the basic definition is that in platform economy, the platform companies, we're referring to businesses that specialize in intermediation services. Platforms connect service providers, but they don't create or own the assets or services necessary for the implementation of work. I mean, the common example of this is the Airbnb that doesn't own any apartments. And when the intermediate service is labor, then we call it platform work, and work mediating platforms are digital online labor platforms, and in this presentation I call them only platforms. And here are some famous examples of platform companies. I think the most famous one is Uber, who has own term for this phenomenon. There's a lot of questions. In the basic definitions we talk about, they are intermediates, neutral intermediates between clients and workers, but the sort of like neutrality of platform companies has been questioned quite many times. And the basic problem is the platform control, how much online labor platforms control the work intermediation and work processes and workers, and should they be considered as employers rather than neutral intermediates or marketplaces. Control varies in platforms. When we talk about control, we are often referring to sort of like algorithmic management, which involves automatic or semi-automatic procedures to allocate, supervise, and rate workers. But what is often overlooked in the research is that algorithmic management itself is really a complex term and consists of various arrangements and levels, which affect the worker experiences differently. And so my assumption before starting this study was that this versatility of platform management implies that experiences may vary among platform workers based on the type of platforms they utilize. Another important term is the orientations. Platform workers are really heterogeneous group of people from different backgrounds and different needs. I think the most addressed question is the sort of like income dependence on platform, that people come to platform work because they need some money in the really bad life situations, but there are also other orientations, sort of like lifestyle choices or they try to find ways to enhance their entrepreneurial careers to platforms. So there are so many different orientations, and it's often common that people with different orientations end up going to different platforms, using different platforms with their working. So this leads to another assumption that those in more dependent positions, those who are more income orientated, will utilize specific platforms more, and potentially this influences how and from what perspectives they evaluate the fairness of these platforms. So here's the purpose of the study. I think this slide is a bit outdated because it's currently under progress, so research questions change all the time. But in this moment when I wrote this, I determined that the first goal is to determine whether workers utilizing differently controlled platforms evaluate platforms and their management activities from different perspectives. Another one is to examine whether these perspectives and motives indicate distinct orientations towards entrepreneurship and platform work. The aim is not to determine whether certain modes of algorithmic management or platform models are fair or unfair. It's just to see whether these people have different criteria when they evaluate the platforms they use. And I don't know if I said in the beginning, but this study is based on 24 interviews with food deliverers and online freelancers. And I compare their experiences. Yeah. in my first article, this is the third article that I'm making, I made classifications of platforms based on their management activities, whether they resemble more of an open marketplaces or hierarchical organizations. I found 6 groups in this classification, and I'm now focusing on 2 of those models. The first one is managed marketplaces. It's sort of like online freelancing platform where people can sell their like translation services or graphic designing, sort of like open marketplaces, but there's still some algorithmic management behind this, sort of like how the platform determines the visibility of workers in the marketplace and so on. And the other example is very different. It's the 2 food delivery platforms where the algorithmic management is much wider. It's much more extensive. Terms and work contents are standard. Work intermediation is managed algorithmically by platforms, and work processes are also surveilled by platform companies. And because we have limited time, I jump into results right away. Here's the first stage of the initial analysis was that I tried to find what is the orientation of doing the platform work. And the first findings say that for most people, the platform work is sort of like an intermediate stage. So the way to get something better, it usually have no meaning for their future working life, or is it's a stepping stone in their careers of entrepreneurship. But most interviews, 18 out of 24 say it's sort of like fits to the current life situation, but it's not a long-term plan to stay in the platform. And as you can see, most of the food deliverers say that they are in a platform because they need temporary casual income or temporary substantial income, and they are more like income orientated. The main reason for them to do platform work is not to become entrepreneurs. It's just a way to get some income in different life situations. And then there are more entrepreneur-orientated platform workers, which are usually in the online marketplace, and their main goal is not to get income, but mainly to sort of like enhance their entrepreneurial careers. And then there's the employment orientation. 2 of the interviews said that they do platform work to become someday employees of the platform company. So sort of like they wanted to something more permanent and stay in the platform company. The second phase was to look at how do they evaluate the platform, what kind of fairness teams they use when they evaluate whether platforms act towards them. And this is, for me, this is quite surprising that even though platforms operate really differently, like they have really different models and different types of tasks they intermediate, people evaluate the fairness of platforms from quite similar perspectives, like the autonomy of work is underlined in every interview, and the compensation is also the theme that is underlined very many times. Of course, there's some differences because the operations of platforms are different, so the criticism and prices, they sort of like target to different elements, but still the sort of like autonomy and these compensation themes are there. But the theme that makes the most differences between these 2 types of work is the support and protection. And because I think we have a couple of minutes time, I will focus on this one the rest of the presentation. In a managed marketplace, people didn't really expect platforms to play so extensive supportive role in their working life. They of course appreciated if platforms took some effort to protect them, but they didn't really expect platform to be the one who offers the support. But then there's the food delivery platforms where this was the most important fairness theme, how platforms interact with them, communicates with them, how does it show empathy for them and try to understand their situation. There are some quotations from the interviews, and as you can see, I think it's just really interesting that this sort of like platforms try to keep distance to platform workers in order to not be considered as employers. But then the first interview said that the reason why the other platform is much more fairer than the other one is that because they sort of like keep the close distance, they try to understand and they interact with their riders. So, and that's the real relationship of a freelancer contractor. So he considers that the freelancer in this freelance model, the platform should be close to them, sort of like not just neutral, but so some commitment to them. To conclude some thoughts, I think this is just quite clear that people with different orientations end up with to different platforms. But I think the last point is the most interesting, sort of like the people in managed work process platforms in food delivery, they have expressed sort of a greater desire for broader societal support from platform companies. They almost like, it's weird that they really, most of them want to be entrepreneurs, but they still have expectations toward platform companies that are sort of like duties of employers. So they sort of like expect platforms to take employer roles. And I have two explanations for this sort of like complexity of orientation. The first one is that managed work process platform exhibit leaning towards cooperation logic and activities typical for employer organizations. So they already blur the line between whether they are employers or marketplaces or intermediates. The other one is workers' orientations towards entrepreneurship appears weak. They are more income orientated. They don't want to be they don't want to build their careers as entrepreneurs, so they are sort of like doing it because of the income. So they are not, they are referring, they are making comparisons of fairness to more traditional forms of employment. Okay, I think I end here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.